Good morning. I'm David Veach, and this is Elevate Your Performance. Let's talk about the birth of the auto industry. Now, the automobile industry literally changed the face of America. The single enterprise led to more technological innovations in manufacturing, metallurgy, electronics, oil refining, distribution centers, road construction, labor relations, and management practices than any other in the history of the world. Until the dawn of the computer age, the automobile industry was the absolute technological driver for the United States. And we can't talk about cars without talking about Henry Ford, but he certainly wasn't the first or the only person focused on producing cars. Leonardo da Vinci designed a self-propelled wagon way back in the 15th century, and a steam-powered road locomotive was invented in England in 1801. But it really took the internal combustion engine to make the automobile economically feasible. Now, the OTTO engine was the first patented four-stroke internal combustion engine way back in 1867. Now, Carl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler each developed practical cars in Germany in 1885 and 1886. And shortly after that, in 1893, Ford finished his own internal combustion engine. And then in 1896, he built a steel frame around it and added 4 bicycle tires, and the Quadricycle was born. And when he tried to get it out of his shed to take it for a test drive, it was too wide to fit through the door, so he had to bust down a brick wall just to get it out. Ford's first auto venture was as a mechanical superintendent of the Detroit Automobile Company, formed in August of 1899. By this time, there were 60 other automakers in the United States, and that number would grow to 253 by 1908. So that early competition killed the Detroit Automobile Company. But in 1901, with the same backers, he started the Henry Ford Company, which also failed. So I guess the third time's a charm. Finally, in 1903, Ford Motor Company launched with a simple car called the Model A, but it eventually morphed into the Model T that we know. In 1908, Ford produced 10,607 Model Ts. In contrast, Daimler, working in the most integrated factory in Europe with 1,700 workers, they produced fewer than 1,000 cars. In 1908, Ford's Model T cost $850, which was more money than his workers could make in a year of labor. Ford's vision, though, was to build a simple but durable car at the lowest possible cost and then pay his workers high enough wages to allow them to afford the very cars they built. At the root of this vision was a core value that a corporation exists to serve society, according to Henry Ford in his book Today and Tomorrow, published in 1926. Now, to accomplish his vision, Ford needed to do something dramatic and revolutionary. While all the other automakers employed teams of fitters working in dozens of workshops, custom shaping standard components to make them fit together, Ford, inspired by a visit to Chicago meatpackers, decided to divide the labor involved among his entire workforce. So in 1910, he built a new factory in Highland Park, Michigan, and began working on a moving assembly line. And in 1913, the assembly line began operations. It relied on each worker specializing in one small area of work and then bringing the work to that worker by moving the car from station to station on this moving conveyor belt. This single innovation resulted in a 900% improvement in productivity over those craftsman fitters. In 1914, in response to high turnover rates and low morale, Ford began paying his workers $5 a day when the rest of the industry was paying $11 a week. And by 1916, Ford was making over 730,000 cars a year, and they were selling for about $350 each. Cars hit the pavement or the dirt roads, so the government recognized the need for those new roads and passed the Federal Aid Road Act in 1916, followed by the Federal Highway Act in 1921. Several other factors combined to enable this revolution in the auto industry, and it essentially saved 2 other industries. First, the price of steel was very low thanks to the construction of the nationwide railroad, but the railroads were no longer expanding at the same rate as they were through the last part of the 1800s. A reduction in the demand like that for steel may have forced some of those steel mills to close But now they have a new primary customer, the auto industry. The oil industry was about to fall victim to electricity until the automobile created the demand for a modified version of kerosene called gasoline. Now, the availability of cheap raw materials, a shortage of skilled labor, and the high demand for cars drove Ford to mechanize that manufacturing process. And this in turn drove the consolidation of the automobile industry so that those 253 independent automakers in 1908, they only turned into 44 makers by 1929. And even then, of those 44, the big three, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, accounted for over 80% of new car sales in America. So next up, we'll talk about aviation and the aerospace industries. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.